Thank you. Okay, so if we can then please now have our speakers for the first plenary session coming up. And I will hand you over to Alexandra, who will do the moderating.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So it's really nice to see you all today. So as has been said by Sultana and Rebecca, we're going to be talking today about how to shape the gender equality movement. We have three wonderful speakers who will talk about what strategies can be used, what challenges they have faced, what challenges are faced in the field of girls' rights, and how basically to advocate for the cause, even as a young girl, and especially, I would say, as a young girl, and what tools you have at your disposition. Unfortunately, just Lipa is not going to be able to be here, but I am very honored to first introduce Jo Munch. She is another fellow young expert here. She recently graduated from Columbia University with a degree focused on international relations, gender, and security, during which she also produced policy recommendations on sexual violence in armed conflicts. Jo now works in the field of international development at Integrity Global, where she helps women and girls access humanitarian and development aid in conflict zones, particularly in Afghanistan. So Jo, could you tell us a bit more about you, about your journey, and what you've learned about gender equality advocacy?
Thank you so much, Alexandra, and welcome everyone. I'm super honored to be here today. I think this festival over the past few days has been this whirlwind of emotions, I feel, but I think mainly very inspiring to have so many women and people just coming here and talking to us about, their experience in advocacy in the legal field, as women, as girls as well. As Alexandra said, I have a background as a researcher by training, focused on gender-based violence in zones of conflicts, focused on, for example, rape as a weapon of war. So I don't have an audience on Instagram. I don't really use social media. I don't like speaking much on social media, but I still like to call myself an activist. I think just because I feel like this can happen through in so many sectors. If you're a student, in the workplace, with your family, I think advocacy is also about this kind of everyday activism that you do for yourself, but also for others. So thinking about my speech today, I was kind of having this introspection about what am I going to talk to you about? I'm no Malala. I don't have millions of followers on Instagram. So what am I gonna, kind of teach everyone today or talk about? So I thought about reminiscing about my own life and what I've learned from my journey as a young girl, as a older girl, teenager, and now as a woman. And so going through my journey into that, I think I had a very normal upbringing, a very, middle-class family. I come from France, so in the suburbs of Paris, much normal. I knew very early on that I was queer. And so I was a queer child. I was very confident in my queerness. I faced a little discrimination, a little bullying, but nothing that I couldn't handle. And I always thought, that's strange because I feel so lucky and so privileged, and I don't know why I feel so still a bit empowered in my own, sexuality when you're young and it's such like heteronormative world. You can feel it can become overwhelming. You don't really understand yourself. You don't really understand the people around you. So I always felt, oh, this is strange. Why do I still feel like I belong, that I have a voice? So I started trying to understand what was going on around me. And I think I quickly realized that my friends really made me feel like, I just had a voice. They just left space or made enough space for me to exist as a human being. And this was a realization for me that this is what I should also do with my own self, let other people be themselves and kind of give them space as well for who they are, not making themselves discriminated and not making them feel like they're different, for example. So I think I really came into my gender studies journey with this approach of my own experience as someone who is, you know, a little bit different, but who is always able to be themselves through the network, through my family, through my friends, through the kind of the support system that I had. So across my journey in academia and now in humanitarian development, this is always the approach that I've been trying to seek: how to make space for others, for the others that, you know, don't have the voice to kind of create the space for themselves. And I think that's how I got into gender-based violence as well, because this is about protecting and advocating for the most vulnerable. Especially, I think I got interested into, you know, children in conflict zones, because, especially girls, because girls suffer the double burden of being a child, so not being able to legally have your own voice, because you're still kind of, you know, your parents still care of you and this kind of things, but they also suffer the burden of being girls. You know, they, in a lot of places, they don't have the same right as boys, they don't have the same access to education. And so I think that's what really sparked my interest in how to kind of help them create the space for them to exist. And I think beyond that, also create the space for them to be able to speak for themselves and more than exist, be able to find the tools to go above and beyond, let's say. I think Justina Omoteo said on day 2, she kind of raised the question how to use your privilege to help others. And I think this is really what the underlying kind of cause of advocacy is at the end of the day. How can I use my privilege to help others, and the others are most vulnerable? How can I create the space for them to exist as well? And I think within that, it's also important to understand who could benefit from me speaking to them, who could benefit from me trying to advocate for these people. And this has been, I think, the core of my research within academia and then also outside of it. So I'm currently working on helping, one of my projects is helping women and girls in Afghanistan better access humanitarian aid through NGOs or international organizations or governments. It's a very, very difficult context. So I don't know if everybody is familiar, but girls don't have access to education past secondary school, for example. There is a complete erasure of women within public life, within the workplace. And for girls, the situation is particularly difficult because within their families as well, there's a context of violence, of extra violence for girls. And so while I was working on this project, one of my coworkers, you know, said to me that there was no point talking about LGBTQI people in Afghanistan, because at the core of what's going on there, the issue, it's a gender issue, and we should just focus on women and girls, which I agree with to a certain extent. I think, you know, it's a very difficult context. It is a gender issue, obviously. But I think this also raises the question of what is a gender issue? And I think at the core of it, we need to understand the underlying layers of what gender means, for example. And within that, also the question of gender identity, and also how to integrate gender minorities within the field of gender. So we try to have a conversation about it, and we try to understand how to include LGBTQI people within the context of humanitarian aid and within the context of international relations and conflict within Afghanistan, knowing that the context there is extremely difficult, and you know, on paper, don't like gay people, for example, are not supposed to exist in Afghanistan. So we're trying to find ways of how to still include them within the work that we do, and that also came through just including them in our reports, for example, in the definitions of gender, and try to talk about them in a way that, you know, they are existent, because they do exist. You do have a report from Human Rights Watch from a year ago, I think January 2022, that highlighted the experience of gay and trans people in Afghanistan, how much they suffer, a little extra than women and girls sometimes. depending on where they live, for example, depending on the social background that they have. So I think it was very important for me to have this discussion with my colleague and explain my point of view and make my point across. So I think this is one of the ways I also advocate within my own situation in the workplace. I feel like, it's never too small. And this made me feel so much better about myself talking about this with my colleague, because I thought, oh, I feel like she really understood where I came from. And then we could have way more constructive kind of conversation about where we wanted our work to go and how we wanted to achieve it as well. And I think overall my point is nothing is too small for advocacy. To me, advocacy really starts within your own network. It really starts with the people who are sitting next to you. And sometimes you feel like you need to have a platform to have the legitimacy to speak up. You have this, we talked about it throughout the whole festival, this imposter syndrome that, you're like, oh, who am I to speak out? I'm no one. I have no voice. I have like 200 followers on Instagram. It doesn't give me legitimacy to speak up about something. I disagree with that. I think that's my point today, that nothing is too small. That, you are able to advocate for yourself, but especially for others, I think, within the smallest way possible. I don't know, at the family table, I grew up in I don't know, I wouldn't say conservative, but more on the conservative side, family. And for me, the kind of dinner table was always a place for advocating for myself, trying to make my point across. And each time felt a little bit like a challenge, but I think with time you just get used to it. And you just kind of understand that it's not that terrible to kind of raise your voice a little and just can make your point across. So I feel like I do have a little tip for everyone today in terms of advocacy and how to use your voice. The first one being nothing is too small. I feel like, when you see something happening to somebody that you feel isn't right, just speak up, because you feel like, it's scary to be the one in the room standing up and being the one annoying person, being like, oh no, she's at it again. She's again speaking about, these people or whatever. But you always have someone in the room who thinks just like you. You will always find somebody who's going to be like, oh, thank God she said that, because I actually do agree with her. And I find it so inspiring that she's the one who does it. So I think also never be scared of that, of standing out and standing for what you think is good. And I think, reflecting on my own experience as well, my final point would be that I got very lucky with the people around me, with my friends especially. I'm always very grateful for them to have made space for me throughout my life and my childhood. And I know that for some people, this might be a bit more tricky because they don't have the support system. And I feel like my advice would be to try to seek for someone who could be that for you. That could be a member of your family, that could be one friend, that could be a teacher, that could be someone you look up to, for example, or someone who you think kind of could think the same as you. Just look for this one support that you need, because once you start with one, you'll realize that this one person has someone else, and then this other person has someone else, and then it creates a whole thing around you that will support you through your advocacy journey, and through whatever it is that you want to achieve. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joe. So I am honored to present the next speaker, who is Doa Gundus. Doa has been involved in feminism since a very young age. She has volunteered in multiple NGOs, and she is now a youth ambassador for Women Against Violence Europe, and is currently pursuing an LLB at the University of Glasgow. So yeah, I would love to hear you talk more about your journey.
Hi everyone. As my peer did, I will be talking about my own journey in advocacy and how I embrace and fight for the feminist agenda and cause. I was lucky to be a daughter of two great individuals who has their own voice and was never afraid to speak up for the things that they believed. So at an early age, my mom introduced me to the idea of feminism, and living in North Cyprus, it's kind of impossible to ignore what's going on around you. It's a very small community, and the sexism is rooted in our language, in our community, in our culture. So I always grew up, I grew up observing such challenges that women face. And yeah, because my mom was involved in in number of feminist organizations, I was lucky to be introduced to the first NGO that I volunteered with. Hayat is a feminist organization from the north of Cyprus that works in the field of gender-based violence. There, I started to get to know the community that I will be standing by my whole life, and the cause that I will be working for, which is a great motivation to see that there are other people around you that is working for the same cause, and you kind of start to see that you will never be alone in the journey. Then in high school, I was introduced to feminist theory, which kind of gave a basis to the ideas that I already have, and being introduced to all the women academics who is working in the school of thought is also very inspiring to know where you're coming from. Yeah, in Kayak, the first organization that I volunteered with, I worked with a group of young activists and attempted to establish our own youth organization. We failed, but it happens. And it was still very inspiring to work with a lot of young people that is trying to find their voices and create the platform to voice their concerns. And once you find your community, there will be a platform that you can voice yourself from. And being involved with an NGO really shows you how advocacy works, with projects, with a lot of organization and effort, networking, community building, finding the audience to listen to you and the ideas that you want to change. Hayat also introduced me to WAVE, which is a network of 170 feminist organizations all around the globe working in the field of gender-based violence. And there I was introduced to a bigger community of young activists and professionals that are working in the area, and that kind of showed me that I have a place in world. I'm my own individual, and working with all those women who are their own individuals, who are not afraid to speak up and be their own voice and voice of others, was very inspiring. That's why it's very important to find a representation that you look for, and seeing someone like you being up there always kept me going and still keeps me going. Even yesterday, I was terrified of like being in London, being with all those big people, and then listening to panels and the speeches given by professional women in the area, showed me that, okay, you have a place here, you'll make it. And right now, it's the third generation of the Wave Youth Ambassadors program. I have 10 wonderful women working with me all around the world. 10 youth ambassadors, they will be looking for women to be the next generation very soon. So look out for that. Yeah, and it has been challenging. It has been challenging as a girl. It all started as a girl, you know, my advocacy journey. And I was told that I am too loud for a young lady. Instead of getting bothered by that, I felt kind of a satisfaction because yeah, I will be loud, deal with it. And I have my support, I have my community. Feminism is a global movement. And the individuals within the community are very strong and will be there for you whenever you need it. And yeah, we fellow feminist activists will be behind you while you're voicing your concerns. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joa. So last but not least, Lauren will be the final speaker. And beyond being also a fellow young expert at the Girls Human Rights Hub, she is an advocate, championing grassroots NGOs at both national and European levels. Her focus is on gender responsive policymaking, gender-based violence, as well as access to education. She is now a campaigner for Our Streets Now, where she has helped to shape policy reforms addressing public sexual harassment and collaborating with the UK Parliament. So, Lauren.
Well, I have a really awful cold, so if I start aggressively sneezing, we're just all going to pretend that it's not happening. Thank you, Ola. Hi everyone, I'm Lauren. I'm really excited to be here today to connect with you and share my journey as an activist thus far. I'm still young, as we all are. Alongside that, I'm hoping to delve into some practical strategies for crafting impactful campaigns and to offer you some actionable steps for those of you who are aspiring activists looking to kind of kickstart your own endeavours. So a bit about me, it won't be too long. Whilst pursuing my English degree at the University of Nottingham, the local community around me experienced quite a significant surge in incidents of sexual harassment, assault and spiking, and it particularly targeted female and marginalised gender students. Living away from home for the first time in many of our lives, without our usual support networks, a notable sense of fear permeated the university campus. Like many of you, I'm hoping, I've always had an innate sense of justice and I've been shaped by strong female figures in my life. While I was already involved in female-centric initiatives as one of 2 students on the International Women's Day Committee, I felt a growing desire to enact a more immediate and tangible change within my community at that time. So this led to the start of my journey into activism with Our Streets Now, and Our Streets Now is great, go check it out. It's a youth-led non-profit organisation committed to tackling public sexual harassment across the UK. So it's a national campaign. I joined our #CrimeNotCompliment campaign, where we collaborated with local law enforcement to implement strategies aimed at creating safer streets. But put more simply, I felt that our primary aim was to empower female and marginalised gender individuals to simply feel secure while enjoying their nights out, whether in a bar, a club, or another public space. Concurrently, so at the same time, we also lent our support to UK Parliament
in amending the Protection from Sex-Based Harassment in Public Bill 2022-23. Our collective efforts resulted in the establishment of a clear legal definition of public sexual harassment. I was one of many invited to participate in a working group by the Women and Equalities Committee of the House of Commons to research the escalation of non-violent offenders to offences committed against women and girls. Aside from this, I also joined the higher education team, specifically addressing the unique challenges posed by public sexual harassment within higher education institutions. Our efforts have included collecting testimonies from survivors and conducting quantitative research and surveys to better understand students' experiences. And I've also been invited to speak at some events on that also. Currently, we are developing both consent and bystander intervention training to be delivered to university staff and students alike. So from this, what I've learned from my engagement in this work is that truly impactful campaigns understand the importance of both legal and policy reform alongside educational and socio-cultural change. Advocating for legal reform ensures that the gravity of the issue is acknowledged at the highest echelons of justice, where offences are codified and punishable. Yet, enforcing these laws and policies also necessitates educating individuals and groups about their rights. Access to education can be freeing and the gaining of knowledge very powerful, especially for girls and other marginalised genders. Moreover, education should target not only those directly affected, but also aim to challenge harmful narratives and shift cultural norms. For me, the coupling of these actions, especially having heard from survivors and those at risk, has been incredibly insightful and enhanced my own ability to then amend policies and lobby for change from a survivor-led perspective. Enough about me. Let's delve into some strategies for campaigning, because I feel like that's very important. And this is specifically at a grassroots level. So when writing my speech, I began to kind of reflect on some key elements that I'd have liked to have known at the start of my own journey. This includes expansion, connection, diversity, and a people-centric approach. Let's begin with expansion. So following the success of the Crime Not Compliment campaign at Our Streets Now, there was a shared sense of uncertainty about our next moves. As activists, however, we quickly turned this momentary feeling into motivation, exploring avenues to broaden and build upon our existing efforts. We began to examine public sexual harassment from fresh and innovative perspectives, seeking new angles to address the issue. For instance, at the moment, I'm helping lead one of our current initiatives, which focuses on sports clubs and gyms, recognising them as public spaces guiding intervention. Next is connection, and I use the word connection rather than networking, as I feel that in the activism space, and though some do remain formal, relationships and connections are often built upon immense trust, a shared passion, and common goodwill. We've heard a lot this week about forging your own personal support groups and allyship, and Joe talked about it earlier as well, and so did Doha. I believe that this network should be diverse, including other activists, stakeholders, lawyers, policymakers, those working in public affairs, the non-profit sector, journalists, and so on. You can only take a campaign so far on your own. And in my opinion, you will never have 100% of the skills necessary, and that's absolutely fine. But don't be afraid to reach out on email, on LinkedIn, through your school network, and at events like this. I think it's important to remember that we are all fighting the same cause in one way or another, and we need your skill set and drive just as much as you need ours. Next, I'd like to talk about diversity, and this is kind of two-pronged. So the first aspect is that it's crucial that your campaign strategies are both diverse and adaptable. What I mean by this is kind of that you must consider and customize your initiatives to fit the needs of your target audience and the issue that you're addressing. Take, for example, the approach of Our Streets Now's youth activists who are aged 14 to 18, so similar to you. They developed a digital platform called Streetworthy, attempting to educate, support, and empower girls of the same age. The project capitalised on your lives as digital natives and the widespread use of social media, which evidently boosted the campaign's engagement and outreach. It's important to remember that there is never a one-size-fits-all solution. Now, the second prong is that you must ensure that your approach is inclusive and intersectional. And the word intersectional is thrown about, but what it basically means is that you consider overlapping forms of oppression. And this includes race, disability, sexuality, and religion, amongst others, which all manifest experiences of discrimination and violence very differently. So again, you can't have a one-size-fits-all approach. Lastly, I'd like to touch on the importance of a people-centric approach. And while this may sound straightforward, it is often overlooked. When tackling issues surrounding girls' human rights, it's imperative to prioritise the voices and experience of those who are directly affected. Approaches should be trauma-informed and testimony-led, where the experiences of survivors are documented, evaluated, and most importantly, understood, especially in a broader societal context. After all, how can we address a problem if we don't listen to and amplify the voices of those who have experienced it firsthand? I'd like to conclude by giving you all some actionable steps that you can take away and start implementing once you leave here today. So, number one is share what you've learned during your engagement with the Girls' Human Rights Festival and raise awareness about girls' human rights. Whether that be presenting to your classmates when you get back to school, hosting an assembly, or creating an informative poster. Activism can start on a smaller level and you can build your confidence from there. I think that's really key. Two, if you're old enough and you have parental consent, volunteer with organisations that align with your passions, starting off in your local community or remotely even. So for example, last year I started volunteering with an international non-profit. That has broadened my knowledge of EU law. It has exposed me to different cultural norms and practices. But what I feel is most important, I have made lots of friendships around the world, and I think it's going to come in really handy for summertime when I want to go on holiday. So number three, if you have a particular area of interest, just go for it and start your own campaign, especially utilising some of the strategies you're going to learn today. This doesn't have to be large scale, and this could begin with kind of fundraising, petitions, or letter writing campaigns to your local MP or government officials. I think we heard from Laura Corriton yesterday, Stop Taxing Period, and she simply started with a petition and it snowballed to 3,000. I don't think she was anticipating that, so it really can start off small and get to very quickly. And lastly, I'm going to plug, as many of you have heard Sultana just mention, the Girls' Human Rights Hub had just launched an ambassador programme to set up your own mini hub with friends or like-minded individuals at your school. And I feel that there is no one better informed to do so. Also, my last point, I'd like to mention that activism can take a toll on your mental health. I think that it's important to ensure that when you're engaging in activist efforts, prioritise and safeguard your own well-being. It is a space where exposed to trauma and often becomes personal risk in extreme instances. At Our Streets Now, for example, contractually we have to declare a trigger warning if you want to disclose something potentially upsetting or explicit to the group. And I think something like that is incredibly important to protect yourself and others. Yeah, so thank you for allowing me to share my own personal journey as an activist. And I hope to be able to give you some practical knowledge and skills to launch your own.
Do we have time for maybe? So if there are any questions for our panelists, feel free to put your hand up.
Wow, we just did such a great job that you have no questions.
We answered everything.
Does anyone want to be an activist? Yes. We'll speak later. Okay, great.
I guess I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
What ways do you recommend people find opportunities? Because I think one of the biggest things is there's such a saturation of different ways that you can kind of get involved, and also so many different niches that you can get involved with as well. How would you recommend finding those opportunities and groups and people to kind of work with? your niche interests.
Yeah, I'll add after.
Okay. I think it's a great question because it's still one that I personally face, I feel every day. I think to find this network, you also need to create it yourself. I feel like I took a long time kind of finding the people around me who could give me the opportunities, especially in a field where you have so little paid opportunities as well. You know, when you want to apply for an internship, I don't know, in an organization, and it's always unpaid, and you need to be at the office and you need to, you know, kind of fund your life. It's really difficult to find, you know, the right opportunities that will allow you to live off your activism. So I feel like what has worked the most for me is creating these opportunities myself. For example, you know, when I found the positions as a young expert at the hub, I thought, you know, like this is the activism that I'd like to do, and I think I could like try to make that work with my everyday kind of job. For example, but I know because this is what my passion is, this is really helping women and girls. This is what my energy is going to be focused on, and I'm going to try to make the most out of this experience. I don't know if you're a student, for example, but I feel as a student, what's the most helpful is really try to make the most out of your campus, because it's when you're a student that you will meet the most diverse people ever. I mean, I don't know if you agree, but I feel like this is when you will have the most opportunities to start your activism if it hasn't already started. So I feel make the most out of the campus that's available to you. What I mean, like societies, and you know, if you don't feel like there is enough representation for what you want to do, I think when you're a student is the best way for you to create your own opportunities and in there. You know, I feel like schools are very open for you to create your own thing as well. And I feel like some of them could be very supportive in you creating your own society, your own organization, your own, I don't know, meetings with kind of like-minded women, for example. So I would definitely say try to create these opportunities yourself, unfortunately, because as you said, it's so saturated that this is what has worked the best for me. But Jonada.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's difficult. I don't know if you're in sixth form or what age you are. Oh, okay. Because it is easier. Like in secondary school, I didn't do anything to do with this, but I don't know if times have changed. It wasn't that long ago, but that's why the Girls Human Rights Hub is so important because of the age range. But yeah, at university is where I found my place. I think also LinkedIn. I know that sounds really cheesy. LinkedIn, follow all the professionals, and there are honestly so many opportunities. Like there's a group called Opportunities for Youth, and they post daily so many opportunities, and you do have to dig a bit. But yeah, LinkedIn is honestly where I've gotten most of my opportunities, like this one, as a young expert I saw on LinkedIn. Again, what Joe said, expanding upon that at university, join societies. Also, like for example, in Nottingham, our streets now had a really big presence because of what I said was going on, the epidemic of sexual violence. Look in your local community and just start volunteering at that level. I think I started volunteering with our streets now, and then I've gone up. So I think, yeah, and in terms of finding your niche or your passion, I'm still doing that, to be honest. I started looking at the broader topic of gender-based violence, and from that, I've realised that I have personal experience. Like I played football for a decade, so very passionate. Don't know. I've played football for ages, so I do have a special interest in sports equality. So that would be different for you individually.
So it's really, I think that you'll have personal experiences. So I played rugby, you've got a football player here. What do you think about playing in wide shorts, ladies?
Yeah.
Until this year, the England rugby team and the Ireland rugby team have followed the men and they played in white shorts. Now they're playing in navy. Who'd rather play sports in navy shorts than white shorts?
Me.
When I was 16, 17 million years ago, I worked at Argos on a Saturday, and the uniform for girls was an A-line skirt. Now, A-line skirts are so old, they don't even exist now, but they just stuck out and you were like an A with quite a broad top. And we took our turn in the stock room, and we'd go up the ladders to get the stock off the shelves, and the blokes would be at the bottom looking under the skirts, and I said, why can't we wear trousers? Because the girls' uniform is skirt. And in the end, I was moved on to the jewellery counter because I was a girl and literate. Whereas I hope if any of you had that, you'd say, well, actually, let's bring about a change. Why do you have to have skirts be a uniform policy? What about a petition to get other girls to sign it? What about, you'll come across situations, and rather than just sucking it up, as a lot of us in our generation did, we want to empower you to think, is this right? Does it have to be this way? Could we create a change? How could we do that? So I think you'll come across life experiences. Do you need this team to play in white shorts, or could we have a suggestion about an alternative?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think unfortunately a lot of it is circumstantial. And like, for example, with the young experts, I am more like my specialist area is more gender-based violence and policy making, but I had the opportunity to do a toolkit on human trafficking, which is something I've never considered before, always had kind of a small interest in, thought maybe I'll explore that at some point. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to choose that as my topic, and I've really enjoyed it, and I want to take that another step further and do something else to do with that. So I think it is perhaps starting broader, and then as you gain experiences and you're exposed to certain things and certain people, you'll find niches, and even if you don't, you'll be fighting for a great cause anyway. So putting your effort in and just waiting for your aha moment is worth doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was just wonderful to speak to our young panel of experts. Some of you may be wondering what's young expert. So at Girls Human Rights Hub last year, last September, October, we recruited 30 young people from around the world, so 18 to 24, who became our young experts. So we have, I think, people on every continent, and we've had about 9 or 10 of our young experts joining us over the course of the festival. What does that mean? What do they do? What do we do? We try and coach and nurture and look after them for a year, and they also do help us with our work. They help us shape, give us ideas, give us feedback, help develop some of the material, whether it's blogs, podcasts, training materials. So we work together and try and build what we hope will be a platform that will be beneficial to everybody. So we do that every year. So we had 2 of our young experts up there today, and of course, I think to send